So at this point, I think it's a good time to introduce authorization in our infrastructure. Let's proceed by creating our Cognito pool and incorporating it into our REST API as an authorizer. Let's create a separate private method called create authorization, and we will create a user pool. Okay, let's take care of the import and also create this member variable. For sign in, we are just going to use email. So if you want to do that, this is the setting to use. And then for the purpose of this demo, I'm also enabling self sign in. This would allow us to create user account by using the hosted Cognito UI. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you will find out very soon. Don't worry about it. This takes care of creating the user pool. Now we need to create a pool client. So there's a method for that called add client. So I'm going to call it main app client. We need to specify the client name. I'm going to use the same identifier as the client name. And then we need to specify the OAuth flows it is going to support. Right now we are going to go with, it should be flows, the implicit code grant, but a more secure flow, if you can incorporate it, is authorization code grant. The reason why I'm not using authorization code grant in this demo is because since I don't have a UI, a custom front-end application, and I would be extracting the tokens manually from the Cognito response. Therefore, there is an additional step that would be required, that first I'm going to receive the authorization code and then I would need to make another call to get the tokens. So for the purpose of this demo, I'm using implicit code grant, but if you can use authorization code grant whenever you are implementing, it's more secure. Next, we are going to specify the scopes. Right now, we only are going to specify the OpenID scope because all we need at this point is the user information from Cognito and the user's email. So this should be sufficient. We also need to specify the allowed callbacks. We don't have any custom application, as I already mentioned. So this could be localhost, but since we don't even have anything running on localhost right now, I'm just going to use example.com. This is where Cognito is going to respond, redirect us, and pass the tokens as query parameters. We also need to provide the supported identity providers for this client. And for this, we are using Cognito user pool as our identity provider. So we're going to specify that. And now we need to specify the validity in duration of specific tokens. So first we're going to talk about the refresh token. We're going to make all of them 1 day. So this takes care of creating the client. Now the last thing we need to handle is the user pool domain. This is where the self-hosted Cognito application, which Cognito provides for us, would live. Actually, we don't need to use a variable for this. We're just gonna create it and associate it with our Cognito pool. Here we're gonna specify the user pool. That is how it establishes the link between the domain and the Cognito pool. And here we're just gonna specify a prefix for the domain. Just gonna use this. So this should take care of creating the pool, the client, and the domain. So everything that we need. I'm gonna call this in the constructor, and this should be created before we create the API, because the API is gonna need this to be there so that we can add this Cognito pool as an authorizer. I've also made a small mistake. For access token validity, this should be days and not minutes. So this is fixed now. We are now going to go ahead and deploy and get this pool created. Actually, I could not record the command. When I ran the command, I could not record it, but I was able to build and deploy successfully. And I'm assuming you guys are gonna trust me on this. So we'll proceed to the next step. Now let's go to our console and see our shiny new Cognito pool. And here it is. We have no users. And if you go to app integration, you should see this is our non-custom Cognito domain with the prefix that we specified. And then here you're going to see the app client that we created. And here is all the information about that app client. Next step is to create a user. So let's go back and copy the domain and access the hosted UI for Cognito and prefix it with, append it with login. But we also need to specify the client ID. So, it's right here. Oh, here. And also, we should be specifying the redirect URI. This could be only from the list that we specify, where we specified in the code example.com. Only that list is supported. Anything outside that list that we pass, then this is not going to work. And we also need to pass a couple of more query parameters for the response type. I'll just do OpenID. Okay, so remember the self support for self signup. So that's where this is coming from, and that's why I did it for the purpose of this demo, because it's just gonna be easy to sign up from here. So I'm going to specify my email, use a secure password. I have the verification code copied in my clipboard. And as you can see, I got redirected to example.com, and I also got passed the ID token. And if you go further down in the address bar, you're also going to see the access token. So let me copy that and for now put it in my editor. You won't see this part yet, but I'm gonna make it visible now. So here you are seeing the ID token, and then you should also see the access token starting from here. So this is how Cognito passes the access tokens. This is a side note. This is a common industry practice to pass ID and to pass tokens like this, but it's clearly not secure. I'm actually surprised why this is such a widely followed practice to be passing tokens as part of your URL, because URLs are exposed when they pass through routers over the internet. So anyone who gets access to any of these tokens would have access to our resources for the duration that these tokens are valid, which in this case is 1 day. And if I'm wrong on this, let me know by posting on the comment section. But this definitely, to me, it seems insecure. And why is AWS actually doing it like this? They should actually be just passing these tokens as part of response headers. Anyway, moving on from my little rant here, and now that we have the ID token, we're going to use the ID token because our scope is OpenID. So we're going to go use the ID token, and using the ID token, we can authorize our calls to our API. Actually, one thing which we didn't do when we created the Cognito pool was we didn't integrate that with our REST API. We didn't add a Cognito-based authorizer. So let's do that now. Let's go to the function that creates our REST API. And here, all we need to do is just create an authorizer and then pass it as an authorizer to each method. So first, let's create our authorizer. For that, we are going to use the CFN authorizer class. Need to specify the REST API ID, and this is what is going to establish the link between the authorizer and the REST API. This would be a better name. So all of these are pretty much self-explanatory. One thing which requires some explanation is the identity source. This is just telling from where the authorizer, the token value is going to come from, and we are saying from the header. Within the request header, there should be a header called authorization, and that should have the bearer token. And here we are specifying the provider user pool for this Cognito based authorizer. Now all we need to do is just pass this to each method. And since we would be reusing the properties, we are going to create a variable for the options. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to call it authorizer options. It requires an authorization type attribute, and the authorizer which is specified through the authorizer ID. And this we'll just need to import. And here we just need to flatten it and then pass it. And just repeat for the other API methods. Time to deploy. Deployment done. Time to go to our console and view our changes. Now when you're going to go to any method, you're going to see within authorization, we are going to see our authorizer. This was for, I think, post method, and you're going to see the same for get and put. Now let's invoke our API again and see what happens. And let's not pass the access token. Let's just use the same requests. And as expected, we are now getting an unauthorized because we haven't passed the token value that we got from Cognito. So let's do that now. I'm going to go to where I copied the response from Cognito after successful login. And then copy the ID token. And now I'm going to specify this ID token as a token in my request. For that, I need to go to the environment where I am specifying the value of the token, and also enable this token. And when you're going to call it now, you're going to see that it would be successful. So just to see the effect again, let's disable it for now. And let's make the call. We're going to get unauthorized. We go back, enable it. Now when we're going to pass it, the call would be successful. By the way we are passing the token is through headers. If you go to the headers, as you saw in the CDK code where we specified the identity source, and we said that there would be a header called authorization within the request. So that's where this is being passed now. So we have an authorization header in our request. We say it's bearer, and then we are specifying this variable, the token variable that we set earlier. So in this part of our video series on building a serverless application using CDK, we created a user pool. We integrated that user pool with our API gateway by creating an authorizer and then associating it with each method of our REST API. We also created a Cognito user. The user signed in. We got our tokens. We used the ID token for authorization in our API calls, and we were able to successfully call the API using the ID token.